Hey gang, Mark LeBlanc welcoming you back to the Alley Cat Workshop. For the very first time, the three hutches are done, the face frames are attached, and the hutches are actually dry fitted together. So what do you think? It's looking pretty good. So in this video, next step is to build the doors and also the shelves for each of the hutches. Should be pretty straightforward. Let's get started. Alright, so for the last day or so, I've milled all the wood for my doors. So I have 12 rails, and 12 stiles and 12 rails. And I'm going to be using the very same setup that I used for my raised panel doors, except I won't be doing the raised panel in the middle, and there's going to be a little twist right at the end as well. So if you recall, when I did my raised panel doors, I had set up two pieces of wood where I did my calibration. So I have my tongue good piece and I have my groove good piece. So it'll be pretty straightforward just to set up the router bits in my router table and actually run this through. Alright, so I've set up my router bit in my router on the table. I've taken my tongue good piece and I have set up the height of the router so that it would match the profile. And I ran a test piece. I actually ran two tests and the second test was conclusive. It is what I'm looking for. So I'm good to go. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to focus on cutting the tongues on all of my rail pieces, both ends. And of course, because I'm cutting end grain, I'm going to be putting a block behind it so that I get as little tear out as possible. All right, let me suit up and we'll get going. Once the tongues were cut into my rails, I reset my router bit and cut the grooves. I started with the rails, and because they're quite short, it was pretty easy to control the pieces of wood by hand. And you can see the fit here, quite nice. For the stiles, I set up a few feather boards to help me hold the pieces in place, just because the pieces of wood themselves are a little bit too long. But I did get a very good result nonetheless. Here's a sample with the tongue from a rail. Looks quite nice. Well, this is what one of the doors is going to look like. So this step now, next step is to put some glue, clamp them together, and unfortunately I only have one band clamp, but I'm going to use other clamps to set these things aside and let them cook. I'll let them cook overnight, and then tomorrow Friday, then we'll get the next part done. Geez, this is a nice looking door. That's all I can say. All right. Have a good one, guys. See you tomorrow, or see you Friday. Well, good morning. I'm back in the shop on this Monday morning, correcting a small problem. So what's the difference between this piece and this piece? Both of them are rails. Only one really is the right one. So this is the ones that I made originally. They are 13 inches long. This one is 13 3/4 inches long, which was what I really need in order to get a proper overhang over the opening of the door. This is where you measure once, where I measured once and I had to cut twice. Instead, I should have measured twice and only cut once. Alright, so I had 4 doors that were glued up though. So what ended up happening? My stiles and my rails are 3 inches wide. So what I did is I went back to the table saw and I sawed the stiles away. So if you look at the topper, you're going to see where, right from here, this is where the old glue up of the original rail was. So I've got this at both ends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my stile pieces through the router one more time, and that's going to remove the piece that was glued up, and then I'll be able to properly re-glue all these pieces together. That little error has cost me a little bit of wood, yes, but it's mostly cost me a little bit of time. Feels like I did this already, but it's now time to re-glue up all these doors. So I'm going to do 3 at a time. Alright, this one's good. Let it set, let it dry. I'll assemble 2 more doors. That'll be the first batch, and then we'll do the other 3. Okay.
It's now 2 whole weeks since I last worked on my doors. In the meantime, I worked on shells, and that'll be the subject of another video. Now let's get back to the doors. So my next step is to convert the groove that I have in my stiles and rails from a dado to a rabbet. And to do so, I'm using a rabbeting bit in my router table. This worked out pretty well, but let me tell you, it generated a ton of dust. Masks on for sure here. And while the router table was out, I switched bits to a roundover bit and rounded all the edges of my doors so that it would be a little bit smoother. Alright, going back to my rabbets, just to square up the corners, just used a nice sharp chisel and cleaned up all the different corners here. The next step was to drill out the holes for my hinges. Now I'm going to be using the Craig concealed hinge jig. It's ideal for what I'm using. It allows you to precisely drill the holes for the screws that will hold your hinge in place, and also drill the 35mm diameter hole for the hinge itself. The only thing that I would say here is that the 35mm Forstner bit is not ideal to drill into this this very hard white oak. Let me put it to you this way. I had to use the force. Alright, we're moving the clock ahead by 3 weeks at this point. In the meantime, I worked on shelves, the backboards, stained applied varnish on doors, the shelves, the backboards, you name it. So I'm back to working on the door, and it's time to install the glass. I'm using a little bit of hot glue and some hooks to hold everything in place. Well, at least for now.
Well, I ran into a little problem. So I thought that I would be able to install the hinges, install the doorknobs, install the locks, and do that today. But when I picked up the windows and looked at them from the other side, I noticed that my little hooks to hold the glass in place are very much visible from the other side. So that's the front. And that's not good because it looks awful. It really does. So I've decided to use a different approach, and right now I'm currently looking at cutting 1/4 inch square pieces of wood that I'm going to use as siding, or that I'm going to use rather to lock in the window in place. It's not taking very long, but what it's going to cost me in terms of time is I'm going to have to put at least some stain on this to blend in the color. I don't think I'll put varnish because I do want to use hot glue to glue this in place. And I'll remove the offending tabs so that they're not visible, and I'll use this method instead. So a little bit of delays, but maybe a day or two because of the finishing, but I think it'll be well worth it, because honestly what I've seen right now so far with these tabs is pretty brutal. So I'm getting ready to mount the doors. Now I need to install the hardware. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pierce a couple of holes in each of the doors. One is going to be for the doorknob, and the second one is going to be for the lock mechanism. The lock mechanism is a 3/4 inch hole, while the one for the doorknob is a 3/16 hole. And I'm using the Craig jig to drill the hole for the doorknob. Okay, so what I've done is I've put some blue tape on the face of each of the doors. This is going to be the left, this is going to be the right. I've put a line at 12 inches from the bottom, and that's where the doorknob is going to go. So let me just install my jig, push it flush against the side of the door. That's the one for this guy. All right, at the drill press I've got my fence right where it needs to be in order to have the right depth of cut. If I use my laser and align it right on my mark, yeah, that's good. Hold it in place, and let's drill the hole. before I get to the very other side, it looks like I need to drill just a little bit more. All right, let's line it up again. All right, I've got a mark on the other side, so I'm going to flip this over. Align my laser mark with the point that went on the other side, and very carefully and there we go. All right, and hole for the lock is in place. So to help me install my doors, I'm using another Craig jig, which is specifically done to hang doors, and it's adjustable for the different types of overhang that you've got on the doors. Mine is set up for a 1/4 inch overhang on both the top and bottom. And what really this thing does is it gives you an extra pair of hands. It's quite easy to use. Just put it onto your face frame, clamp it in. There's a platform where the door just lies. Just place the door where you want it. I'm going to drill right into the center and put a little mark. I'm going to do the same thing for the hinge in the bottom. Okay. Take the door down. And I will now properly drill my holes. Pretty deep. Another thing too is that the manufacturer for the hinges recommends that you use a 1/8 inch drill bit. I'm actually using a 5/32, which is 1/32 more. And reason being is I found that with the white oak, getting the screws in was a big challenge. But just by adding that extra 1/32, made it a lot easier. Still very secure. All right, let's drill the holes. And once again, I'm going to use the platform to just hold the door in place while I put the screw in. Pretty good. All right, the last thing I need to do on this door is install the lock. So I bought these lock mechanisms. These are cam locks. This is the actual lock itself, the barrel itself. It's slightly over 1.25 inches long. So that is going to go straight in to the 3/4 inch hole that I drilled before. In the back, I'm going to put this ring. Now let me take the barrel out again and show you. So the barrel is, I don't know if you can see this, but it's flat on 2 of the sides. And this ring actually has flat sides, so it will go into the mechanism as is. It doesn't turn. So that's going to lock the cam lock into a certain position. The next thing you put in the back is this nut, and that's going to lock everything in place. So the one thing I do need to check right now is the direction that this lock is turning, because what I want is when it's in a vertical position that it is locking, turn it clockwise and it unlocks. Okay, so I got it in the right place. Alright, so pretty simple process. Put the lock in. Right now one of the flat surfaces, or the two flat surfaces are, one is on the top and the other one's on the bottom. And this lock mechanism comes with two brackets at the back. There's this one which has an angle, and there's also a straight one. I'm going to use the straight one in this case. So what I'm going to do right now, the cam is in a lock place. I'm going to line up the lock itself. Screw that screwdriver. Or as Elmer Fudd would say, a screwdriver. Alright, test it out, that looks good. And there we go. All the doors are installed, all the locks are installed. Good to go. So thanks for watching, folks. I know this is a long one, but there's a lot going on. And subscribe if you haven't done so. Click that like button, and I will see you next time when we build drawers.